So welcome everyone to the Community IT Innovators webinar for the 2025 Nonprofit Tech Roundtable. This is always one of our most popular webinars every year. We have a panel of our senior staff here today to talk about essential trends in nonprofit tech and what that means for nonprofits. We're going to talk today about hybrid work and whether it really is here to stay or if we'll all be back in the offices in a few years. We're going to learn about new cybersecurity threats and prevention, about the impact that AI tools are having on our work in our sector, and we're going to learn some new updates to Google Workspace, Office 365, some other tools, and some other updates. My name is Carolyn Woodard. I'm the Outreach Director for Community IT and the moderator today. I'm very happy to hear from our experts. Matt, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, great. It's great to be here and talk about some tech trends for the upcoming year. My name is Matthew Eshleman, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer here at Community IT. And happy to say this year I'll be celebrating my 23rd year at Community IT. So super excited to be here. And it's interesting, doing these to kind of see just how much technology has changed, particularly in the nonprofit space over that time. So looking forward to the conversation today.
Me too. Thank you for joining us. And Steve, would you like to introduce yourself? I think you're also going to give Matt a run for his money of how long you've been with Community IT.
I'm like the little brother. No matter how long I stay at Community IT, Matt stayed there longer than me. I've been at Community IT for 20 plus years now, and I am the Director of IT Consulting. And I'm also excited about being on this webinar panel. I've been doing this webinar. Matt and I have done this webinar together for many years now. So looking forward to it.
It's always fun. It's a good one. All right, so before we begin, though, if you're not familiar with Community IT, I'm going to tell you a little bit about us. We're a 100% employee-owned managed services provider. We provide outsourced IT support. We work exclusively with nonprofit organizations, and our mission is to help nonprofits accomplish their missions through the effective use of technology. We are big fans of what well-managed IT can do for your nonprofit. We serve nonprofits across the United States. We've been doing this for over 20 years. We are technology experts, and we are consistently given the MSP 501 recognition for being a top MSP, which is an honor we received again in 2024. I want to remind everyone that for these presentations, Community IT is vendor agnostic. We only make recommendations to our clients and only based on their specific business needs. And we never try to get a client into a product because we get an incentive or a benefit from that. But we do consider ourselves a best-of-breed IT provider. So it is our job to know the landscape, the tools that are available, reputable, and widely used. And we make recommendations on that basis for our clients based on their business needs, priorities, and budget. Today, we're going to be discussing several themes with our experts. We know that nonprofits are always facing challenges and sometimes feel more challenging and more stressful than other times. We do know for a lot of nonprofits, this is one of those times. It's very challenging and very stressful. We know that nonprofits are used to strategizing lots of different outcomes and being smart about planning. So we hope today you can take a breath, take a mental break, and focus on some specifics around planning for nonprofit IT. By the end of this session, we hope that you will have learned about this hybrid and remote work discussion and what does that imply for nonprofit IT support. Is hybrid and remote work here to stay? We're going to learn about new cybersecurity attacks and prevention. We're going to learn about what you need to know about AI. And at the end, which we're going to try and make a lot of time for, we have a grab bag. So other new things in 2025, including some updates to tools that you use. And I just want to make sure to acknowledge that, as I said, we have some challenging times for the nonprofit community that are going to impact how you plan for and invest in your IT. Of course, we hope that you keep investing in IT to stay productive and stay active and able to achieve your missions. But there will be, of course, economic uncertainty. around a lot of issues: trade, inflation, immigration, changes to government priorities, shifting DEI policies, and funding changes related to these changing tides and ideas around the nonprofit role. So, we're invested in nonprofits, and we hope to support you, but just wanted to acknowledge that as we go forward. All right, so now I'm going to turn it over to Steve, who is going to take the lead on last year's predictions versus the reality, and then we will jump right into the webinar.
Sure. So this webinar, we've been doing this for many, many years, and we do like to look back at what we said last year. And we were joking together, the three of us, at our planning meeting a few weeks ago that we could almost take last year's slide deck and just copy it and change a few things, and we could have the same thing again for 2025. And there's a lot of truth to that joke for sure. So we talked about AI last year. We got that one right. Turns out AI was important last year. It'll be important again in 2025. We'll spend some time today talking about AI, so I won't hash it out here. We did predict that there'd be new cybersecurity threats in 2024 back in last January, and we were right about that. I expect we'll be right if we predict in 2025 there'll be new cybersecurity threats. We'll be right about that too. That is an ever-changing landscape. So again, we don't need to get a lot of credit for that. We talked about Google Workspace, Microsoft 365, that would continue to be of great interest to nonprofits. It is. Those are the kind of you live in one platform or the other, and it's probably the most important platform to your overall productivity. Finance department member might care more about their finance system than they do about Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace. But in general, it's the platform we all live in, one or the other. I'd say we back off on that. We'll talk a little bit about this again today, but I'd say that in some ways things have kind of stabilized. Microsoft continues to really invest in their platform. I'd say in the long view, we have seen Google have periods of intense investment in Google Workspace or whatever the predecessors were named. The platforms had different branding over the years. And then other periods where it's kind of like laid a little bit low. And I'd say right now, Google's priority is definitely on AI, of which there's an angle for Google Workspace. But I think Google Workspace is getting less attention than it has in some previous years. So that is what it is. We may talk about that a little bit. And then we're going to start out right here at the beginning by talking about hybrid work. So yeah, it turns out that you can rinse and repeat on tech predictions these days because sort of the same themes keep coming up year after year, and that's not a big surprise.
Yes, so hybrid work, we're going to talk a little bit about, but we wanted you to weigh in. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll. And the question is your nonprofit going to keep working remotely? And the options you can choose are yes, we are all remote, no office forever. Yes, we have a hybrid setup. If you have details you want to share with us, you could go ahead and put that in the chat. We know there are lots of different hybrid ways to set up your office, but we have a hybrid setup and we're going to keep it that way. Another option is yes, for now. We are assessing the pros and cons and we may go back to an office. The fourth option is no. We tried hybrid and remote work and we went back to the office. So we did an experiment and went back. And then the fifth option is no, we never went hybrid or remote for most staff. And I apologize. Usually I put in the none of these apply to me, but I didn't do that. So if it doesn't apply to you, just don't answer this question. Matt, can you see that?
Yeah, I was waiting. I couldn't see the results coming in, so I was kind of curious to see what it ends up as. So in terms of the responses for the folks attending today, so about 11% of the respondents are saying yes, all remote forever. The vast majority of the folks are saying yes, they're hybrid and we like it. So that's the vast majority of the respondents, 67%. 15% of folks saying yes for now, assessing pros and cons. Interestingly enough, nobody said no. They tried hybrid and remote and then went back to the office. And then, maybe just a few folks that said, no, we never went hybrid and remote. I know, we have a couple of direct services, health clinics, food banks.
Someone mentioned being an outdoor educational facility in the chat. Hard to be remote if that's what your organization does. Yeah.
So interesting responses. Particularly, we're headquartered in Washington D.C. In particular with the return to office mandate from the federal government. To be curious to see how that potentially trickles down, or maybe gives cover for some nonprofit organizations to call staff back to the office as well. They were waiting for a reason.
Yeah, I wanted to just thank you to the people who put into the chat your experience with hybrid work. So one person said they're back 3 days a week. Someone said hybrid works for everyone, especially during storms or there's no electricity or water. Someone, as Steve mentioned, said an outdoor educational facility, kind of hard to go remote in that situation. And someone said that in-office days are focused on in-person full team or whole department meetings. We do have a client that they went back to the office 2 days a week, but it's the same 2 days for all of the staff. So everyone is in at the same time. So you can get that benefit of popping into someone's office or meeting for lunch or doing those things. Someone else said, we have been meeting in person once a month and decided we like to see each other. So we're going to twice a month this year. And someone says we have an all hands home week 3 times a year. So kind of the reverse of making sure that there's sometimes when no one is in the office, everyone's working remotely. So thank you so much for sharing that. Hybrid work is here to stay, or is it? This is what we said last year, and we think this assessment stands for nonprofits generally. But as we've said, the corporate world, federal offices are shutting down hybrid remote work and forcing people back into the offices. So our question is the nonprofit world going to stick with hybrid work or eventually follow the corporate and federal world? So I think, Steve, you were going to take the lead on this discussion, but hoping that Matt will chime in as well. So the return to physical offices is, in fact, in terms of nonprofit IT.
Yeah, it's interesting that our audience polled that they answered the poll. It seemed like I was just sort of doing the mental math. It seemed like 90% of the organizations are currently doing hybrid, and only a few of those 90% are even really reevaluating it at this time. Now that doesn't mean that there aren't hybrid, of course, doesn't mean fully remote. So it does, there is still an office space. There is still, for many, an opportunity to engage face to face in team meetings and so on. And I think that works. I do think that nonprofits, their selling point in terms of recruiting staff is, mission fit. This is your opportunity to make the world a better place. And then also, that it might be a nicer place to work than a dog eat dog enterprise for-profit world. And that, people that are self-selecting to work in nonprofits might be, nicer people or whatever. Our clients certainly seem, and they're all nonprofits, certainly seem like nice people, generally speaking. So I think that fits. And I think in keeping with that idea that, hey, we may not pay you as well as if you were working in a for-profit law firm. Do you want to work for this nonprofit law firm instead? Just to throw out, one comparison point. But we do give you work-life balance. You're not going to have to work 65-hour weeks. You might be able to work remotely more often than you would in a commercial setting, kind of a thing. So I think that it makes sense to me that nonprofits would continue to build on the technology that allows people to continue to do their jobs well, even when they're not in an office. But I do kind of also wonder, that just a part of me, a devil's advocate part of me, that and with a lot of trends, technologically and otherwise, I'd say that, nonprofit organizations oftentimes are, I would say, as lagging behind the for-profit space for whatever reason, just more conservative. So some of the trends that we saw really going strong in the for-profit space and hit the nonprofit space later include things like IT security and stuff. So there's a part of me that wonders, hey, is it going to be the case? Because we're definitely seeing, these are big corporations, but so there's a scale difference too. But Amazon is making everybody come back to the office. Carolyn mentioned that Trump just signed an executive order. All federal employees have to come back to the office. And, that's huge for people that have established, patterns that work for them that involve working from home at least some of the time. So is this going to be a place that now forevermore is a distinction between nonprofit and for-profit? I don't know. We don't know the answer, but we certainly see our clients embracing hybrid workspaces and taking advantage of it and viewing it as a real advantage. And community IT is somewhere between remote only and a hybrid. Matt's in our office today, I know, but it's not that common anymore for us. We'll have meetings in the office from time to time, but many of our staff live all over the country, and we rely on virtual meetings to stay in touch. So I've talked a lot. Matt, do you want to talk a little bit about the requests that we've been getting on the not the security side per se, but what do you want to call it?
Yeah, kind of on the productivity management side of
management.
things.
And
I think that was maybe
that's interesting.
kind of a new spark or new trend that I saw come to me in 2024. Again, as Steve said, we may be nonprofits kind of lagging the for-profit sector. And I think from that perspective, we're talking about, more maybe draconian or strict management standards. So, for a long, long time, we've always said, we don't do staff productivity monitoring. There are tools that we have as a managed service provider, right? They're geared towards security, and we are blocking malicious websites, but we're not in the business of reporting, kind of who's going where, what percentage of their day maybe somebody's on the internet, and kind of the messaging is really, management through staff relationships. But in 2024, I will say I had more conversations with organizations looking at and evaluating or deploying those productivity monitoring tools, because I think that lack of in-person, interaction, being able to kind of drop by and see, what somebody's doing, rightly or wrongly, I think organizations are maybe feeling a little bit disconnected from the actual productivity monitoring of staff. Like, are they really, using their time to the fullest? And so organizations have started to look at those, kind of quote unquote productivity monitoring tools that would provide some reporting. How much time is Word open on the computer? How many words have been typed? What percentage of time was being used on business websites versus, kind of personal or recreational sites? So I think that is something I'm interested to kind of continue to monitor and follow, because it's something that was new, and I think does represent a little bit of a shift from a management perspective in terms of how that kind of management staff relationship is working. There's lots of flexibility working from home, but then there is, I think, also a sense of, why, if I can't kind of see somebody doing their work, like, how do I really measure and gauge their productivity if I don't maybe have other tools or other ways to do that in a good and effective way?
It's kind of an icky topic, it's like, ugh, you're going to count someone's keystrokes, or you're going to like monitor which websites they visit, like in a, not like, it's just, ugh. But I also appreciate that when everyone was in the same office, you could just sort of walk behind someone and see what was on their screen. And sure, probably people, quickly replaced solitaire with a Word document when they saw you coming. But, it's like just a different environment than it is when everyone's working from home. And I'm sure that it's abused. I'm sure it is. I mean, hopefully not much. And hopefully the people in this audience have missions that inspire staff to work hard and hire people that are just self-motivated and all of those things. But like, that's not human beings are come in all varieties. And what do you do? How do you know? It's tough.
I thought that was an interesting part of this discussion, is that we all brought up, there's a lot of management issues with managing remote workers. And so it would be interesting to see if the nonprofit sector has has better practices at managing or like having those trust relationships between colleagues, and also vertically between, direct reports. And so if the, overwhelming atmosphere at nonprofit offices probably before lent itself better to remote working or hybrid working because there were, better relationships between
Hmm.
the people. And you said there's a trade-off usually with salary. So I think it's going to be harder too for nonprofits to crack down on, you have to be back in the office. And then a lot of nonprofits, a lot of our clients gave up their offices during the pandemic. They just were
Sure.
going to remote. And so it wouldn't be the case like Amazon where they invested in this, multi-million-dollar facility and then everybody was remote because of the pandemic. And now they have to justify having built their office buildings. A lot of nonprofits just don't have that and actually like to have the less overhead of not renting a space for an office.
Mhm.
Are there particular investments that you need to make IT remote work better that people should be thinking about for the next couple of years? Or is it really just keep doing the remote and hybrid that you've been doing and, see what happens?
I mean, I think a lot of the organizations have already kind of made that shift, and I think I think the technology is now really in a place to support that. I think kind of at the beginning of the pandemic, that was a big scramble, right? Moving to cloud-enabled platforms and kind of away from on-prem physical infrastructure. But I think at this point, among the clients that we manage, the number of servers that we manage has really dropped precipitously. Most of the line of business applications are all in the cloud, and so kind of as long as you have a computer with a good internet connection, you can be kind of productive wherever you are. And so I think that kind of tooling infrastructure has already been deployed at many organizations. I mean, we still see organizations that haven't made that shift, but I think that's in the kind of the small minority of organizations that we encounter at this point.
That makes
I,
sense.
I do, yes. So I agree with Matt that the technology is kind of there, and I think our clients and probably the people in this audience have already like found their way to whatever platforms they use for virtual meetings and so forth, that we're probably still evolving the way we use those tools. And what I mean by that is, I don't think it's a one-to-one replacement for how we did, we had this many meetings in the office. So as just one example, our team, the team I manage, the two teams I manage, they're not together, but individually, I attend, huddles with the team, and it's easy to do virtually. And it's just a chance for people to say what they're working on and if they're having any roadblocks. And I know we've mentioned this in other webinars, so it's not like rocket science or whatever. But we never had huddles like that when we were in the office because it just would have felt redundant, I think, when we can just ad hoc see each other whenever we want to. But to have a deliberate time for a huddle makes sense in a virtual world. And I think, one of our audience members talked about good and poor and not poor management in terms of like getting people to work hard. And I think that takes a relationship. So how do you build relationships virtually? Like maybe, you need to have a different style of meeting with your direct reports than you might have before. Maybe the frequency changes, or maybe what you're trying to accomplish in the meeting is different. I spend a lot more time with my meetings talking about people's families and how they're doing, just generally, than I probably did in the past, where that conversation happened at the water cooler, and the meeting was for establishing priorities, finding out what roadblocks were. And now I'm like, well, you know what? This is my chance to make sure that I'm connected to this person who lives, 3 states away and who I only see, once a year at our home, our DC week, where when we all gathered in DC still. So anyway, I think that so it's the non-technical practices that I think are evolving, and we're still finding our way on that, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I will just jump in to say, we talked a little bit earlier about sometimes nonprofits are lagging other business practices, but this may be an area where nonprofit management is leading in like being able to establish those relationships and being intentional about keeping those relationships going even when you're remote. So I think we're going to change gears a little bit here and talk about cybersecurity threats. So Matt, you want to take the lead and hit some highlights on cybersecurity?
Yeah, kind of building off what Steve said, looking back what we talked about in 2024, I think a lot of that has continued. It's always evolving. The report from the FBI in terms of what's the cost of cybercrime in the United States has not come out yet, but we kind of fully anticipate that the amount of cybercrime will kind of continue to increase from a financial cost year over year. And again, I think as organizations can understand and appreciate that they're being targeted by cyber criminals that are interested in their financial resources, not necessarily in their mission, I think that can help change the mindset. I think the use of AI, I think we can kind of see that in terms of how the sophistication of spear phishing messages, I think, continues to increase, right? Kind of all that well-crafted language, right? That's easy now for for these threat actors to use and adopt. And so a lot of the hallmarks that we used to be able to rely on, poorly worded messages, bad grammar, all of that, really kind of goes out the window. I think the trends that we had seen in terms of account compromises, I think, unfortunately, continued unabated in 2024. We're, I'm pulling together, our data in advance of our incident report that we'll talk about in April. But, it looks like the number of compromised accounts we had is going to be kind of at a similar level to previous years. And things that we talked about, attacker in the middle framework stealing credentials from accounts protected with MFA, continues. And so that's why we've made an update to our cybersecurity playbook to really encourage organizations to adopt strong MFA methods, particularly for IT staff, for executives, and for finance in particular, as those accounts are really targeted by these threat actors in their, basically preparation or working on financial crime, right? So wire fraud. So a lot of that stuff, really kind of continues. The tools in place to help protect organizations, I think, can continue to get better. So there's really good protections now for protecting digital identity, having that strong multi-factor authentication. We talked about FIDO keys or using Windows Hello or platform SSO. Those tools are available. And then, some of the other acronyms we have up here targeted around email are finally, I think, in a place where they're being enforced or required. So again, that acronym of DMARC, that is a little DNS record that basically says, hey, email from our domain is going to come from these places. And if you get an email that says it's from, our domain, but isn't on this list, quarantine it. So I know a lot of organizations, when we're doing assessments, they have that record, but the flag is set to just report, right? Just give us some information about it. If you have cyber liability insurance, the automated tools that are, kind of checking your compliance are flagging that now to say, no, it's no longer good enough just to report it. You actually now need to say quarantine or reject. And so just understanding a little bit about how those email support records work to basically provide validation that you are who you say you are when you're sending messages is really important. So I think on the cybersecurity side, those are a lot of the trends that we see kind of continuing, mostly around kind of evolutions and sophistication around well-crafted messages. Financial-based crime is still really the ultimate goal for a lot of these organizations. And that's all really being perpetrated primarily through email-based attacks. And that attacker in the middle framework continues to be very effective. So I think, Microsoft and Google really still have a lot of work to do to kind of catch up to protect the digital identities so that, if and when a credential gets stolen, that attacker can't use it somewhere else.
Thank you so much, Matt. We have a lot of resources on cybersecurity on our site. As Matt mentioned, there's the free download of the cybersecurity playbook. So if you need to get to a foundational level of cybersecurity, that should help you out. We're gonna switch gears again and talk about AI policies. So have another quick little poll for you all. And that poll is, do you have AI policies at your nonprofit? So the first option is, I don't think so. I didn't want to put just no because it may be that there are some somewhere, but it just hasn't been publicized, or maybe you don't have any or such. So if you don't know, then just say, I don't think so. Second option is, we are in the process of creating policies. So we know that we need them, but we don't have them fully created yet. We haven't shared them with all staff. We're in the process of doing it. And if you are looking at creating AI policies, we do have a free template download on our site as well under resources. So you can download that to get started, but you do have to customize it to your own organization. And then the final option is, yes, our organization has created an AI acceptable use policy, and our staff understand our policy, and it's a living policy that people are using.
So do you have AI policies? I don't think so, question mark, is what 30% of our audience reported. A little over half reported that they were in the process of creating those policies. And then 15% are in the great shape of saying that they do have an AI acceptable use policy and that their staff are using it. So kudos to those 7 people who were able to answer that way for their organization.
Absolutely. Congratulations. All right, we're going to go on and talk a little bit more about AI nonprofits. So again, this is what we said last year, and we stand by it. The only thing I added here was that nonprofits are using, so I feel like in the beginning of AI really making this huge big splash, there were a lot of stories about a few nonprofits using AI to achieve their mission. So using AI to do some kind of analysis that made it faster for them to reach more people or that sort of thing. And now I'm seeing a lot more stories about nonprofits using AI intentionally or ad hoc to allow staff to do a lot more by using these new productivity tools. So that's something that we're going to talk a little bit more about. I think, Steve, you were going to take the lead on talking about the hype cycle for AI and nonprofits.
Yes. So first of all, I wanted to steal an idea or a quote that I hear a lot on various tech blogs and so forth that I read. It's attributed to Bill Gates, but apparently Bill Gates was just requoting a guy named Roy Amara, who's like an early computer scientist out of Stanford. And the quote is basically that people overestimate how much tech will change in 1 year and vastly underestimate how much it will change in 5 years. And I think that is probably true about AI. So if we were looking back in a year ago and thinking about our predictions about 2024 and what happened in 2024, we may have overestimated how much AI would change the landscape, but we shouldn't take that mistake and say, oh, well, then it won't, the 5-year vision is similarly also not going to be very impressive because it's probably not the case. So yeah, so we are definitely seeing growing use of it. I would say that in general, it continues to be sort of a life hack for the staff, for the users that choose to use it. And so it is very possible to do your job without AI, and most people are probably doing their job without AI. But the folks that have sort of figured out, oh, I can use AI for this and I can use AI for that, are either being a lot more productive or getting their jobs done a little bit earlier and, knocking out a day, an hour early each day or whatever. Probably because since we're all talking about nonprofits that are working hard for the good of their organization's mission, they get more done in 8 hours than they would have otherwise. And I can speak to this from personal experience. I've had a co-pilot license courtesy of Community IT for most of 2024, and I have eyed it with suspicion at times. And other times I've gone ahead and tried it and I've had mixed results. But the times that it's really helped me, I got to say, wow, this really helped me. I'm thinking of a time, for example, that I needed to do some analysis in an Excel spreadsheet, and I could have Googled it and read some tutorials and figured it all out. But it was really pretty cool that in Excel directly, I could click on the little Copilot button and ask my questions in sort of natural language, and then Copilot just gave me this formula that was, several lines long that I could copy out of the Copilot window and paste it into the cell. And then boom, I had sort of the analysis I was looking for. And that was pretty cool. So that is what we're seeing a lot of. We're seeing it sort of built into the tools. If you have Teams or Zoom or even whatever, virtual meeting platform you use, you're probably used to seeing now artificial intelligence generated notes. That's wonderful. Like taking notes while you're leading a meeting is difficult. Having someone who is like a formally assigned note taker is great, but if they're trying to also participate in the meeting, that's hard to do that double duty. So having an agent do it and do it decently is pretty cool. The expertise with which that agent does it varies. It depends. I mean, but I do think that they're getting better all the time. The other place that we've really seen, you know, just incredible progress in the sophistication of what the tools are delivering is in the generation of graphics and video. So, if you nowadays, it used to be that when I would do a PowerPoint, um, I really valued having some nice illustrations or graphics or whatever that went with it. I was always very careful about not taking things that weren't in the public domain that I was allowed to put into my PowerPoints if I was giving a presentation to clients or whatever. But I ended up spending a fair amount of time scouring media wiki, places where there's these graphics were available free of charge. And if I had a budget, maybe I would have gone to a graphic artist and said, can I have a picture of this or a picture of that, a key unlocking a lock, something like that to illustrate my thing. And now you can just ask AI to do it. And, people whose livelihoods depend on producing these graphics and videos as human beings are reasonably concerned that, that their 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 productivity is being potentially replaced. Although, at this point, still maybe they're able to leverage that to make themselves more productive. I don't know, but that's definitely improved. That improved a lot in 2024, and I expect it will continue to improve in 2025. What we have not seen much yet, and that's what this bullet point chatbots from Salesforce is like this idea of like top down, management saying we're going to try to replace human beings with AI. I think that might be more of that. Don't underestimate what will happen in 5 years or a longer horizon. Like I think that these changes are just getting started, and I don't know where it's all going to lead, but we're not seeing that yet. Like AI is still very much kind of an individual's uh, life hack, if you will, to like being able to be more productive personally. And they're not really having to show their work to anyone. And it's not, so you can make your staff potentially more productive if they're willing to use these tools and are able to use these tools. But it's not at a point yet where you can sort of mandate the use of the tools or find that you can cut your workforce you know, by 10% because you're going to have AI doing that other 10%. Matt, do you have thoughts
I
on
did.
what I've
Well,
said?
I wanted to jump in there because I was at a conference last week, and actually there was an interesting use case or a situation about the kind of this AI chatbot that came up.
Mm-hmm.
And the one was saying, so as a legal services organization, one of the services that they provide is kind of a staffed interactive chat service. So people that have legal questions can use their chat service, talk to qualified, either attorneys or paralegals to help get information about whatever legal services that they're interested in. And they have noticed actually like a drop off in their engagement on chat because they're finding that people will just go talk to Gemini or Copilot about their legal question and get it answered that way, as opposed to using their, more well curated resource. And so I think the challenge, I think, for them as an organization is like, okay, well, so now how do we like respond to this changing demand and competition, right, from these, more bland, generic AI services that are just spitting out results, curated from Reddit and all these other places, versus, maybe we need to look at building AI chatbot services on our curated knowledge that we have as a way to do that. And so I think that was an interesting window into maybe some of the competition that exists for, if you're an organization that provides resources as part of your service delivery, how can that be? Because I do think most of the AI use and adoption that we've seen has been largely an individual productivity improvement, as opposed to organization-wide, kind of process improvement or chatbot or data analytics. It seems to be, nonprofits, I think, are still, that's maybe an area where they're behind because they don't maybe have quite the same financial incentives to help justify the investment to figure that out, because I do think it's going to be expensive.
I don't think even in the commercial world that many corporations have gotten that far along in more than the individual productivity.
Well, I mean, I do think
there's
the numbers that you see in terms of developers like at Google and at Microsoft, I think the productivity of code creation, even though it's still requires human review, but I think processes like that, I think those big companies are able to kind of see like, oh, we invest in this platform, now we can like hire 50% fewer developers and we can increase our speed to market and kind of do all this other stuff. And so I think to some extent there's a scale question as well, but I'll be curious to see how the trickle-down effect impacts smaller nonprofit organizations.
Well, I wanted to segue. I'm sorry to cut off this great conversation, but we have this great grab bag as well, and there are a couple of questions in the Q&A as well. So the Google Workspace, I think you made this bullet point that they have added storage.
Yeah, so I did it in the review of last year's predictions. We talked about last year, we predicted that there'd be continuing tension between whether do I want to be a Google organization or a Microsoft organization. And I said at the beginning of this presentation today that I feel like Microsoft continues to really be a strong investor in the Microsoft 365 platform, particularly on the security side, obviously the Copilot AI side as well. It makes sense. That's their bread and butter business. That's what they are. They're a services company, whereas Google is, driven by search first and foremost, which is, driving their revenue by selling ads against those search results. So it's just a different business model and cultural incentive structure for them. And so I don't see them as investing in Google Workspace as much. That said, we see it's really interesting how I think it was in 2024, if not, it was in late 2023, that Google started rolling out 100 terabytes of free storage to their nonprofit charity customers. So if you had the charity level license, you suddenly were able to avail yourselves of 100 terabytes of storage. And if you're not a tech person and not sure what a terabyte is, it's a lot. It's a lot of storage. It's an awful lot of storage. In contrast, a lot of our small nonprofit customers have something like, 1.5, 2 terabytes of SharePoint storage. We are seeing our clients running out of SharePoint storage. It's not a daily event for us. It's not even a weekly event, but we see clients, tickets come in. We're like, oh, we're running out of storage. What should we do? And then, you're scrambling to either try to delete old files that no one needs. The value of doing that, it's like it takes labor. You have to make decisions. Do I keep this? Do I throw this away? Most of the time, it's cheaper just to buy more storage. But Microsoft is not making it free, and it does have ultimately it's a never-ending cost. And our clients that are having to do that obviously don't like it. So it's really interesting, this contrast. I don't know whether that means that Microsoft is just at some point going to be like, well, we have to have parity with Google. We're going to give away a lot of space too. It used to be that we talked about storage being free, but and of course it was never free, but it felt like it was free, and we're now seeing on the Microsoft side the impact of it, of the fact that it's actually there are limitations, and we do have clients running up against it. So that's just an interesting contrast. Otherwise, I feel like, the two platforms continue to exist and continue to be good enough. Microsoft is getting better all the time. Google's is kind of holding steady, but it's okay.
Thank you so much. Matt, I think you were the one who talked about the annual commitments and the low discounts becoming kind of the subscription model.
Yeah, so I think Microsoft made news. I mean, they finally increased the price of Microsoft 365 after it being, basically the same price for a number of years. So I do think that this is kind of around the edges. The nonprofit community continues to get very good discounts from Microsoft. But at the same time, we're kind of now have made that switch from like, oh, we're going to buy the software 1 year and use it for forever, to now we're switching to this, what was a monthly recurring cost. Now, we're seeing vendors switch to be like, hey, well, you actually need to do an annual commitment to get that same pricing. If you're on monthly, we're going to raise the price. And so there's going to be some differences there. And so I think to some extent, the original promise of this cloud utilization and it being dynamic and you just kind of use as much as you want, and when you don't, you just turn it off, I think it goes away a little bit, because we're all, most organizations are not dynamically changing, and you have relatively static, kind of staffing loads. And so, I think your software is just going to cost a little bit more, and it's still better and cheaper than trying to do it yourself.
For
I
sure.
think that's
Trying
just, yeah,
to keep a server running, as we talk a lot about, is recurring costs that are a lot more than what you're going to pay in subscriptions. Matt, did you want to talk about this ARM chip for Windows? Who was going to talk about that? And now I can't remember.
I mean, it's interesting. So ARM, is like a different chip architecture. Mac a couple years ago, or Apple made the switch to their M platform, switching away from Intel. We're seeing the same, and they got tremendous battery life gains and performance gains. Microsoft or Windows is being a little bit late to the party, but again, we're seeing a similar shift now away from, or in addition to, Intel-based chips, ARM-based chips, which are supposedly going to have much better battery life. The good news is that it's probably going to be largely transparent to end users. We've tested all of our endpoint management tools, our security tools, like everything just works with the ARM chip architecture, and we're waiting to see, the battery life and performance demands pay off. It doesn't look like it's going to be that much cheaper, but I think it's a performance side play instead of a cost saving side play.
So something to keep an eye on.
They're actually like the chips that are traditionally in phones are now going into computers, and they run a lot cooler. They're totally different architecture. So the software stack just basically needs to be rewritten. And so that's why for Windows, it was a longer rollout, I think. They've been around for a while, but like for quite a while, it's like, well, we can't really try these computers out because half the software we use doesn't work on it because it's not been rewritten for it. And I think we're viewing 2025 as the first year that we'll really start. I don't think we have any of our clients buying ARM chips in ARM Windows computers yet.
Yeah, I think there's one other computer other than our test machine that's in our management fleet of 8,000, right? So or 6,000 Windows computers.
But the promise of the 12-hour battery life perhaps, and also just running cooler. I mean, everybody's experienced how hot a laptop can get, Windows laptop can get when it's really running fast and furious. So it's a good possibility. I'm excited about it. We'll have to sort of see how it plays out in terms of, does all the software actually run? The word on the street is just that for gamers, it's a non-starter right now, because all the game software doesn't run except on the traditional Intel chips. But 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 you know, probably most of us are hoping our staff are not playing games on their organizational laptops as much as they're, you know, word processing and browsing the internet for whatever. Yeah.
While we're on Windows, do you want to address this point of the Windows 10 and the end of support, which was a question at registration?
Yes, yes, thanks. I'll quickly take that one. So Windows 10 is going to reach end of support in 2025. I think it's October of 2025. At that point, Microsoft will stop issuing patches for that operating system. So any um, bugs or particularly vulnerabilities that are discovered, and they're discovered every month, they're discovered, and that's what a lot of what the security patching is covering up, correcting vulnerabilities with code updates. That will stop for Windows 10 in October of this year. And so we haven't yet, I mean, we've been encouraging our clients buying new computers to buy Windows 11 computers for quite a while now. The difference for users of Windows 10 and Windows 11 is, you know, they look a little different. There's definitely differences, but we don't feel like you need to have a long training course on it to make the adjustment. It's pretty intuitive. So it's not that big a deal to have a mix of Windows 10 and Windows 11 computers. At some point, we're going to push Windows 11 out to the Windows 10 computers that, you know, and when I say at some point, like it has to be soon because we have until October. So we will be getting, that will be a priority in the next few months for our clients. The question that came with the registration that Carolyn passed along to us was, what do I do with the Windows 10 computers that are not able to be upgraded to Windows 11? And there are a few things that computers have to have. First and foremost, among them, I think, and Matt, you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but they need to have a TPM chip in them for Windows 11 for them to be eligible, for them to be able to be upgraded to Windows 11. If you have a computer that can't be upgraded to Windows 11, and the question is, what should I do with it? I would tell you to make sure that you e-cycle it as responsibly as you can. Don't just put it in a landfill. But you are done. That computer is over. I'm sorry to tell you that, but it has reached the end of its life. You know, I don't think it's worth keeping. If you really can't bear to throw it away, I guess you could put it in an offline lab of some sort or something. But really, I would say, you know, cut your
Yeah,
bait.
because it's not going to be able to
It's
get
an
any.
old computer.
Yeah. Mac parity with Windows Hello and the platform single sign-on. So I can't remember now who wanted to take that.
Yeah, so this is a little bit of a tech geek out thing because it ties into a couple of underlying technologies. Steve already mentioned one of the acronyms, which was TPM, which is a security chip that is in Windows computers. So in the Windows world, Microsoft uses that TPM chip to secure and generate kind of unique security IDs for you. And so then you can sign in with your Microsoft 365 credentials, and then that TPM can store some information and is a secure phish-resistant MFA method that can be used then to log into websites and kind of other applications. And so that's been like a super handy feature for Windows users and Microsoft 365 to basically have one username, strong password, and it's all kind of self-contained within you know, kind of the Windows platform. That is not something that was available in Mac. And so if you're a Mac user, like I'm actually on a Mac right now, and logging into Microsoft 365, you kind of have your local ID that you use to log into your Mac, and then you have a separate login that you use to log into your Microsoft 365 credentials. So Microsoft has now released a feature, it's in preview technically, called Platform SSO that basically allows you to use the secure chip on the Mac called Secure Enclave to basically do the same thing. And so you can, with Platform SSO configured, have single sign-on to access your Mac, to access all your Microsoft 365, to use a secure phish-resistant MFA method. So it's going to be a really tremendous security benefit to streamline things, to streamline administration and make things a lot more secure for your Mac users, and to provide kind of that feature parity. So it's like the same basic things that you can do on a Windows computer, you can do on a Mac computer as well.
Wow, that is so great. I know that's going to be different. I just want to shout out to our amazing chat. So we had a question in chat about how to find out if you're on Windows 10 or 11 after the discussion about the computers that are going to be useless. And someone in the chat actually helped that person. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much. We wanted to talk a little bit about data source silos as an ongoing issue, like as data and I guess AI search as well is becoming a bigger thing. We still see a lot of clients that have silos. So can you talk a little bit about that?
I think we put this on the list mostly to acknowledge that most small nonprofit organizations do have their data sort of in individual silos. And while there is a move afoot in the greater technology world to put these things into data lakes and make it possible to sort of mingle all your data and bring it all out, with AI queries and other kinds of queries to get the data out, that most of us are not at that place and probably won't be at that place in 2025 either. So it's more of like a note to like that there's some cool stuff on the horizon coming, but probably not something that the small nonprofits are going to be able to do. It hasn't trickled down yet to the smaller organizations. That's my takeaway from on this topic. Matt, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that this is an area probably where nonprofit clients are probably ahead of us even, because I think organizations really know their data and know it well. And so I think over the past couple of years, lots of investment has gone into this area to really take advantage of the data that is there. And I think as organizations again are kind of prepping to really maybe use AI services beyond just kind of individual productivity enhancements, like having a good foundation of data to access and use and to feed into these systems is really valuable. I mean, one of the things, this is not a data lake, but again, if you're thinking about adopting AI kind of internally, it's really helpful to know kind of in the Copilot world, right? That Copilot has the same permissions that you do. And so if your SharePoint site is just completely open and you've relied on security by obscurity, somebody searching for, hey, what's the payroll information for my organization? That information would be surfaced if you haven't adequately restricted your data. So I think in the same way, organizations that are trying to think about, well, how can we use data or AI effectively? We don't really have a capacity to do that right now, but maybe we have capacity to really take an audit of what data systems we have, where does it live, what are the security, what kind of data, is contained there? Do we need to make any additional controls or restrictions? I think that's a good place to start, is just understanding your data, where it lives, kind of what's contained within, so that then you can, take advantage of it and be more effective with it later on.
I think as long as I've been in nonprofits, which is like 25 years now, that's been like the killer app of how can we easily find data without having to clean it up. And I think I just listened to an interesting podcast a couple of months ago from a company that does this for nonprofits and talked about data lakes, data warehouses. Like so far, not yet, is there like a magic AI tool that you can just give it your confusing, disoriented, not labeled correctly data and have it tell you what you have and have it find all of the things that you need it to find. So I'm sure it does seem like that is something that the next few years is going to be really talked about, and the tools are going to come out, especially with AI being able to do more and more. But I think still, like, you have to do the work. You have to look at what your data is, where it lives, who has permission to it, and make some of those decisions about what you're going to archive. Again, I want to shout out the chat. There was some really good advice on being able to figure out what you need to archive and how to do that. So thank you again to the chatters. I think we have one more question, which was, I thought, a pretty good one that came in through Q&A. So what other considerations should an organization consider with AI and other use policies that help an org protect its staff who may be targeted in this administration or this political climate, shall we say? So do you guys have some ideas about where to look for support on protecting staff?
I think there's a couple different things in there in terms of protection. I'll probably start with a new thing, and maybe this could have made it onto the trend list. But again, I think a new thing that we've started to see in 2024, and I think will continue into 2025, is protecting an individual's personal identity against doxing or harassment, kind of online threats. I think a lot of the work that we've done with community IT and other kind of cybersecurity stuff has been around protecting your organization's digital identity, your work computer, your work email, kind of all the stuff that is around your work identity. And we know you have a personal email, but that's kind of separate, and we don't really think about that. I think from a cybersecurity threat model perspective, certainly for high-profile organizations or policy organizations, your personal identity was kind of in play as well, right? Threat actors would target your personal email, your home, your spouse, like other people in your house.
Find your home address.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that was, they wanted to, target, they weren't just targeting your work email, like they're targeting you as a person. And I think that is now extended to, I think online bad actors. It's not just, Chinese state-sponsored hackers that are kind of going after people individually, but we've certainly seen it kind of online doxing, people that have a different political identity as you, kind of going after you as an individual with, because of your politics or your identity. And so we are seeing more organizations and more services that are really focused on, doing some basic stuff like removing your kind of personal digital identity from, kind of web services, and then kind of even, individuals that may be even, targeted, beyond that, removing kind of all aspects of your digital identity from the web. That could include things like putting your house in a trust to remove your name so your address can't be located. So I do think that there is a lot of movement in that space in terms of really protecting your personal identity against, kind of like that malicious online actor from, targeting, doxing you as an individual.
We had a question come in about where to find policy templates and which policies are, necessary. I'm going to share a link to our governance webinar that we did last year that has a bunch of links in it to other sites that have good templates and good information on setting up those governance policies. So we do have that there. And we have a quick question. What is a data lake? Anyone want to take that?
Yeah, I realized I jumped into that question without explaining what a data source silo or a data lake warehouse, data lake houses were. So vaguely or generally, the idea here is that, your data lives in a service, a database, if you will. So your Microsoft 365 data, which might be your email and your SharePoint files and your OneDrive files, your Teams chats, that's all in the Microsoft 365 silo. And then you might also have a finance system which has a bunch of accounting records, but that's not probably Microsoft 365, although Microsoft does have Microsoft Dynamics, so it's possible that it's also in Microsoft, but more likely it's a different system. And you might also have a system for managing your organization's customers or contacts or stakeholders. It's called a
Donors.
CRM generally, donors. And that's a different system. And if you're a school, you might have a student information system, and you might have multiple student information systems because there might be one tied to the charter school board that you report to, and another tied to, your grading system, and another tied to attendance or whatever. And how do you bring all that together, because obviously the same identities or query points can appear in all the different databases, but since they're in silos, you have to sort of address each one individually. The idea of a data lake is that can we dump all that stuff, somewhat unstructured perhaps even, into a single place, and then use AI to like sort of connect the dots and bring out the information that we need, without worrying about which silo it originated from. And yes, that is happening. There is a lot of work being done in that space. But it tends to, at this point, these are massive investments being made by very, very large organizations. And I'm sure there are very large and medium large nonprofits that fall into that category that are doing something like this. But most of our smaller nonprofits can't afford it and aren't quite there yet. And like I was saying, the trickle down hasn't happened. Those tools will probably get more efficient and more inexpensive over time, and it will become an easier thing to do. But at this point, we're not at that point. And so at this point, there's a lot of value to using Microsoft 365 if you're a Microsoft 365 organization as much as possible, because then everything's in one silo that, you might not be able to do your, everything in Microsoft 365 because Microsoft 365 doesn't do everything, but do as much as you can there. Don't have a separate system for files. Don't use Dropbox for files, Microsoft 365 for email, and Zoom for chat, because then there's 3 different systems. That's okay. And maybe that works best for you. But if you want to have it all in one place where one Copilot can access all of it, you might do better to have it all in Microsoft 365 or Google if you're a Google customer. So that's a better, more grounded explanation for what I was trying to say earlier. And I apologize for not even saying what a data lake was before.
But like we said, I think that just demonstrates that data, like where your data is, how you access it, how you use it with these new tools to make it more productive and to do, clearer analysis on it, to connect those dots. That is going to be a continuing story. So we'll probably, when we do this next January, we'll definitely be talking about data. Whether it's in lakes or lake houses or warehouses, I don't know, but everything is changing so quickly. Hope that so far we did cover these learning objectives, talking about the hybrid work, the security attacks, what to know about AI, and then grab bag. Before you go, I want to make sure to mention that our next webinar is the cybersecurity awareness training tips with our team members, Matt and Anna. There are many tools out there to help you move cybersecurity training from a boring and maybe useless once-a-year video to a dynamic and up-to-date regular mini training that will give your staff real experience identifying scam emails and learning the first steps to take if they get something suspicious. Matt, who's here today, is our resident cybersecurity expert and our CTO, and Anna manages the program that we use with the clients. So they have so much experience. If you have been thinking about this, you haven't implemented it, or you're having struggles with having cybersecurity training that your staff are really doing, I'm really excited to have Matt and Anna give us their advice. That's going to be at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific on Wednesday, February 26th. So I want to thank you, Steve and Matt, for staying extra, staying after school for a few extra minutes to answer a few more questions. This is just always such a great webinar to, be able to ask you what's going on, what are you seeing, what are the trends, what's happening. So appreciate your time today. And to everybody who stayed on also extra, thank you for staying. And we will be putting this video and the transcript and the podcast up as soon as possible so that we can share all of this information with all of you. And we'll see next January what we were right about and what we missed. So thank you, Matt and Steve, for joining us.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.